Revelation 12:11. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they loved not their lives, even unto death.
The things that have been inflicted onto me, the things that I've inflicted onto myself, the Lord healed me completely.
All things, all beings submit to him. I could speak the name of Jesus and that evil would leave.
All I could feel was a peace and him say, "Not yet, daughter."
I called his name, and within a second, my breathing was restored and I could breathe normally again. I could not believe it.
And I saw Jesus interceding for me. And he said to me, "I've been protecting you from things you never even knew about."
Martyria. Welcome to episode 25, Savannah's Martyria, The Witch in the Woods, in 16 minutes. God can take everything and use it for his glory, even medical death. So join us now as we have natural talk about Savannah's supernatural walk.
I would say I was brought up in a lukewarm family. My father was raised in the church, and my mom was somewhat raised in the church until she was young, like a very little girl. So my extent of church until I was 14 was basically going on Christmas and Easter. And then when I turned 14, I joined a youth group at a local church, just for the community, to have friends. I would go to Wednesday night services, but I didn't understand anything. And then at 17, I joined another church and went for a little bit.
Gotcha. So you started going for community. That's pretty common. A lot of youth do that, right? My friend's going on Wednesday night. I'm going to go on Wednesday night. But by the age of 17, you said you joined another church. Was that for regular services as well, or was it again just for more community?
It was a lot of the kids that were in the youth group at the one church started going to this other church, so I kind of went along with them. I would go to the services, but a lot of the times I would just stay out in the parking lot hanging out with my friends. And I was very ignorant to everything. I didn't know about Jesus. I didn't know about the Holy Spirit. I know that was preached about, but I tuned all of that out. I thought that God was just a big guy up in the sky.
Yeah, it makes me think of if your car needs repairs, so you take it to the mechanic, but you park it outside and never go in to let them know what's going on. Oh, well, why isn't my car better? Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, maybe you should go
that's so
inside.
interesting, right? But yeah, no, that is funny to think about, that you're going there for community, which is awesome. I mean, church is a great place for community, but then you're kind of keeping yourself separated from it. Was there really any other reason to go other than just kind of hanging out with friends? Did you ever, sneak into a service every now and again, or?
I had some things going on at home, and I think at the time I was looking for love in a sense, help in a sense, and I knew that church was supposed to be a safe space where you could go and ask for help in times of need. And I think that's kind of what I was searching for too. And I did find that at that church for sure.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear at least. So it sounds like your experience was good while you were actually in the church. Yeah. So you started going there at 17. Did you go for a few years or till you graduated and then went off somewhere else, or?
I went for a few months until I got sexually assaulted during my time going to church. Not by anybody in the church at all. But it really messed with me. And it made me think, hey, if there's a loving God, why would this happen to me? Why would he allow this to happen to me? Very confused, scared. Looking back, I believe I was angry at God in some sense because of what had happened to me. And I ultimately I stopped going. I stopped having contact with anybody. It was like a cold turkey type of situation for years. And then I fell deep into witchcraft and the occult.
Did anybody reach out to you when all of a sudden you were not present at the church anymore?
They did, and I ignored it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm glad that they did, because that is something I recognize that happens oftentimes, is somebody stops coming and then they're like, well, whatever happened to so-and-so? Where'd Savannah go?
Exactly.
But I'm glad that they at least, were attempting to reach out. But hey, ultimately, that's one of the beauties and challenges of free will, is we can respond or we can not respond, so you ended up diverging from going to church kind of passively into a lifestyle of witchcraft. What did that look like? Like, what drew you to witchcraft initially?
So essentially, it was just like curiosity. Like I just kind of stepped away from God and was living very worldly. And then a few years after the sexual assault, my grandmother, who was my best friend, passed away tragically.
Hmm.
At that point in time, I was very close to a cousin who was into witchcraft. And I started getting more curious about crystals and nature magic and this, that, and the third. And that's kind of when a door was opened. But I also believe a door was opened when I was a child, just due to the movies I watched, TV shows, books I read, things I was exposed to.
Hmm.
I can remember, little girls pretend to be princesses and stuff, but I remember pretending to be a witch. I remember using a vacuum cleaner, pretending it was a broom, so there was definitely some exposure as a child.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. So curiosity, I mean, obviously is not a bad thing, but it's interesting to see that, because I'm a very curious person too, and it's
Mhm.
interesting to see how a curious thought can really lead us down a very long path. And
Yes.
and I mean, there's nothing wrong with liking a crystal. There's nothing wrong with
Yes.
liking nature. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, but it's not about the thing itself, but who created those things. You know what I mean? I think that's one of those things that I find a lot of people who have come from witchcraft and probably who are currently practicing it. I always like to say they're 1 degree off. You're almost worshiping the right thing. You're
Almost.
almost there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Crystals, I know a lot of people will say like crystals are demonic. I do not believe crystals to be demonic. I don't believe nature to be demonic. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's a lot of good validity to that. That's like saying, you take any rock and you try to worship it. Well, that doesn't make all rocks bad. That just makes your
Exactly.
purpose for that rock wrong, right?
Right.
You shouldn't be doing that. And I think crystals are the same thing. Now, there is a lot of people who talk about, vibrations and power and intent, behind these crystals, but you could really say that about any any sort of rock. I assume one day somebody saw a clear rock and they're like, this looks really cool. Ooh, there's maybe some power here. Or,
Right.
I mean, I'm being a little bit, a little bit facetious about it, I guess. But I mean, ultimately, you could say the same about granite, or really
Yeah.
any type of rock, or so I agree with you on that front. It's not necessarily the item, but the intent behind it. I mean, I wouldn't
Exactly.
say if somebody had a bundle of sage, I wouldn't be like, oh, what are you going to do with that witchcraft? Like, who knows? Maybe they're chopping up herbs for something. I don't know.
Exactly. To cook with or something. Who knows?
Yeah. So ultimately, I think I side with you there. But curiosity is one thing, right? And then transitioning fully to be part of it is a different thing. So at what point did it stop being an interest in crystals and nature and start being I'm going to worship, or I'm going to, I don't know, participate in power that I see, or I don't know what necessarily drew you more towards that lifestyle?
Um, I think it was kind of like a rabbit hole. Like I just kind of went deeper and deeper and deeper and then went down this rabbit trail to that rabbit trail. I mean, I was all over the place. I was studying paganism, the different types of like witchcraft and magic, dabbling in Wicca a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
I was very fascinated with like Aleister Crowley. Now, I didn't follow his teachings, but would watch like documentaries about him and stuff like that. very into like everything paranormal. And then it got to the deepest part when I got sexually assaulted again in my late 20s. And that, again, really messed me up. And at this point in time, I was just angry and I was mad. I wanted revenge on this person. I started, I was already doing like tarot readings and going to, psychics and crystals and all of that. But at this point, it turned into spell work. I was doing curses on him. I was doing hexes on him. But at the same time, I had a little tiny business where I would do little spells for people, love spells. I would make little potion bottles, sold things in a store. When I say things, I made like candles, jewelry, stuff like that.
Sure.
But I would say it definitely got the deepest after the second sexual assault. That's when everything it went from light to massively dark. And I don't really think the witchcraft is witchcraft to me. But it went from somewhat of an innocent, like, oh, I think I'm a fairy half the time. And I was very much into fairies and the mystical side of things. But then it got into deep, dark revenge. And at this point in time, my life was just crumbling. I mean, piece by piece, it just started to crumble and fall apart.
I want to talk about that, but I'd actually like to move back a little bit in time because I know you had talked about the first assault was around 17, 18, 19-ish.
Yeah.
But then into your late 20s, it happened again. So that's 10 years or so of being within, kind of witchcraft. And I know you were saying that you were kind of going down the rabbit hole to all different aspects and elements of witchcraft. The one thing I want to know is, obviously if you're continuing on in it for a while, something has to be working or happening. Like, are you experiencing, and actually you mentioned fairies. So I appreciate the mystical aspect of it as well. Like, I'm curious about that. Like, did you ever see any fairies or interact with fairies or anything like that? Or was that part of your belief system?
I never actually saw anything that I thought was a fairy. When I tell you I was obsessed with them, my entire apartment, which was like a townhouse, had, the little fairy gardens everywhere, little trinket trays with offerings with like herbs and crystals and what have you, posters all over the wall. Like, I was just fascinated by fairy lore and wizards, and studied wizardology and just all of this stuff. And the fantasy and the mysticism of it just drew me in. And essentially in the beginning of my witchcraft journey, everything was good. Like, I was essentially getting happier. I didn't really have any problems in my life. I was financially stable. I was healthy. And then as the years progressed, everything got worse. Started hearing voices. I got diagnosed with multiple mental illnesses, bipolar, PTSD, anxiety, depression. I went from being financially secure to being completely broke. Like having maybe $1 or $2 to my name. I went from being happy. I was very selfish and ignorant. But if you had seen me, you would think, oh, that girl's pretty happy. And you definitely wouldn't have looked at me and said, oh, that girl's a witch. But I was so unhappy by the end of it. I was in total despair. And I don't say that word lightly. I mean, it was bad. There were
Mm,
attacks on my family. There were attacks on my health. There were attacks on my mom, not like physical attacks, but like spiritual attacks. And
mm,
it just got out of control to the point where I honestly started to think, did I cause this? Did I, somewhere along the lines of, did I open a door? Because in the beginning, I was very much on everything is love and light, good energy. You have to sage this, if you buy it at a thrift store to get rid of the energy. And so my
mm,
mind goes back to, did I buy something at a thrift store that I didn't cleanse or that I didn't bless? And it's funny that as I say the word bless, because I was into witchcraft, but I would still
mhm.
say, I blessed this object with sage, or I blessed this object with, whatever.
Yeah, I'm curious if you don't mind going into it a little bit, but like when you say you started to hear voices, what was that like? One, did it sound a certain way? And two, when you heard the voices to begin with, did they start saying things to you that ultimately changed as time went on?
So it would start out with just like really bad intrusive thoughts. And at the time, I
Mm,
didn't even know what intrusive thought really was. I mean, I had
mhm,
heard the term, but I didn't know, like, hearing like, you're worthless and you're everything is hopeless and all of that. I didn't kind of put that together. But it
mm,
started as just intrusive thoughts. And then as
yeah.
time went on, I would hear sometimes it would be audible. Like it would sound like I would be hearing things in my apartment. Like I would be hearing scratching or
Mm,
hearing knocking. A lot of the times things would be moved and it would always be like random objects, keys, a lighter to light candles with,
mm,
little tiny things. But when me and my mom started noticing that, I started kind of seeing things out of the corner of my eye. It would be
hmm,
like dark shadows. A few times it looked like an actual person, like, I don't know how to explain it, like a clear person. Like you could see the outline of it being like a person, but almost like I don't want to say like a ghost, but something kind of along those lines. It was really creepy at the time. And I
hmm.
didn't know what to rebuke it or anything like that, but I would just be like, get the heck away from me, like get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I interviewed someone who was starting to who grew up in a family of shamans,
Hmm.
and when they would see spiritual things or demonic things, as she described it, they would actually curse them out. That was what they were taught to do, was to curse them out so that they
Okay.
would leave. And
Yeah.
if that didn't work, then you say Jesus, and then it would leave. Which was I always find that element to be so interesting. Like, why do we have Jesus as the last resort? But
Right.
um, so you're starting. So what one thing I think is interesting, and I've noticed this with a lot of people, and I think even in my own life, and maybe everybody has this happen to their in their life in some way, is this idea of an intrusive thought. It's never a you should work harder because you're doing so good, like, or go
Mhm.
treat yourself. It's always you're worthless. It's always trying to strip you of a characteristic of your humanity that God has made you, in his image. And I it's so fascinating to me because it hits everybody in a similar way, where it's like you start to hear you're worthless and you're like, that's weird, where'd that come from? And then you start to think that you're worthless, and then it's easy for those increasingly negative thoughts to kind of make their way in. And unfortunately, and I say unfortunately with some, not with trepidation, but like I understand that your outlet was then to go get medication, to get help, or to get professional help. I don't know if were on medication or not, but the idea of like, oh, this is a mental health thing. It's your brain misfiring in some way. There's some synapse that is just, and it's like, well, wait a second. This is a very spiritual thing. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very spiritual thing. And so I mean, obviously now you're not where you were. Um, do you still wrestle with intrusive thoughts or that type of
For sure.
I don't yeah, it's still there.
It's still
Yeah,
there from
it's
time to time. It creeps
yeah.
up, and
Oh
you
yeah.
know, I have to rebuke it, and then I pray, and it's something that I'm still working through for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Me too. I still struggle with a lot of like depressive thoughts. That's
Yeah.
a very big challenge for me, and it's one of these things. I've talked to somebody else about it as well, but it's like when you hear the thought the first time, and you're like, I don't know what this is all about, but then you start accepting it. I think what makes it so challenging to kind of get rid of them is when you start to assume that those thoughts are your own thoughts.
Right.
And then it's like, well, wait, it's not a spiritual thing. It's a me thing. And then all of a sudden I am the problem. I am worthless. I am. And it's like, well, wait a second. Hold on. These are things being said to me or trying to be spoken over me that
Right.
I've accepted for a long time. So it feels like it's my own thoughts. It's such a tricky mind game that that the enemy likes to play, where it's
Yeah.
like, if I can strip you of your humanity in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form, then I can continue to take that away from you. And the less human you feel, the less worthy you're going to believe you are of God's love, or just the fact that, you know, Jesus died for you, or like the fact that you know what I mean, like that you have any sort of worth or humanity at all. And that is classic.
Yeah.
Tale as old as time. I mean,
Right.
it really is. Um, so man, and you also were talking about things were kind of moving in the house, and you were seeing kind of these shadow or outlines of
Yeah.
people, and out of the corner of your eye. That's another, like, I've heard a lot of people talk about that as well, where um I've even had one person who was saying, when I look at it straight on, it was very blurry. I wasn't sure what it was, but in the corner of my eye, it would seem to kind of form a little bit more. And like you were saying, how it's like I kind of saw the shape of a person sometimes, and sometimes it was just like it was just a little bit different in that way. Um, did actually before we get to it, the fairy thing is still, I really I want to keep talking about that. I just think
Right.
that's very interesting. So you left like trinkets and things like that outside. Did you ever find them missing or anything missing, or
Sometimes.
sometimes?
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, obviously I'm not saying that means, you know, it's a fairy. It could have been a squirrel or, you know, whatever, a
Oh
curious
yeah, I would
raccoon or
leave them
something, but
outside all the time. I mean, there were little kids in the apartment,
oh yeah.
all the little kids, and I'm not proud of this, but I've always been kind of like a kid magnet. Like kids just kind of, I'm just good with kids. But all the kids knew that I was a witch, and they would call me the witch in the woods because we
Mm,
essentially lived in an apartment complex in the woods, and I would teach them about crystals and herbs and stuff, and
mm,
they thought it was the coolest thing. And I mean, I would, you know, they knew that, you know, Savannah had a little dish by a tree, and they would
mm,
add, you know, rocks and stuff to it. And at the time, I didn't see anything wrong with any of this. I thought it was just all innocent. It was an interest of mine. And then
mm.
looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, like kids literally referred to me as a witch. And I'm talking like young kids, like 5 and 6 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not okay with me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, the nice thing is, and I appreciate what you're saying. The nice thing is God has this way of turning things back around, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like you were saying at the beginning of the episode, now you're teaching Sunday school, right?
Right.
I mean that's the thing. Like I love working with kids. I was a middle school teacher for a short time. Like I completely understand that. I love seeing minds at work. But it does make me wonder what it is if we have like a predilection for like something tangible, you know, like giving the kid like, here's a crystal, and it's like, now let me tell you about the crystal, and they're very interested about it, as opposed to saying like, you have a creator who made all of these
Exactly.
things. You know what I mean? Like what is it? Because and I think that kids in general, even like you were saying, like movies that you watched as a child, and me too, grew up very much a Disney kid, you know, saw all the things,
Yeah.
love Sword in the Stone, love all that
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that stuff. Black Cauldron was a great, I
That
enjoyed that
was my
movie a
favorite.
ton. Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And but it's like, what is our fascination with that? Like, we want to see, even in the Bible, a lot of what's recorded in the Old Testament, outside of the Israelites just running away all the time, are these very powerful supernatural moments. Moses encounters a bush that's burning but isn't consumed on a mountaintop. Like a river turns to blood. Like things that we don't observe in our daily lives. But I remember listening to a theologian, Michael Heiser, talk about the Bible is going to record these things because that's what they want to record for history, not, oh yes, day 3,567, Moses and the Israelites walked 2 miles. Like, okay,
Right.
like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just, so the nice thing is we get to see God moving in a very powerful way in the Bible, but the not the bad thing, but we lose sometimes sight of the fact that we are just living everyday lives. You know, we want to see these high spiritual moments. We want to see the magic. We want to see, you know, as a child, we want to see wonder, and children are so susceptible to that. I mean, that's why I can
Yeah.
pull a coin from behind my daughter's ear and she thinks it's the best thing ever, you know, like
Right.
that's totally fine. But then at the same point, it's like, we as Christians worship the God who is over all of those things, like is above any sort of magic, is above any sort of supernatural whatever, because he's outside of those things. And that's,
Right.
it's so fascinating how kids would much rather want to use a broom or a vacuum as a broom than they would, you know, like, let's read about Jesus, or let's
Exactly.
learn about God, or, you know. But I, as I was saying, I wonder if that's just kind of like maybe part of our sin nature, or if that's
Right.
you know, I don't know. But time obviously goes on. You're practicing kind of light and love as your witchcraft journey kind of begins, but then ultimately, I know we talked about it already, but there was an assault in your late 20s, and then things started to change for you. Um, when they started to change, and you're doing things like hexes and curses, are you finding success with that? Are you seeing them being effective? Or
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely saw justice for sure, whether it was rightful justice or whether it was my spells. I couldn't tell you, but there was definitely justice. And from, I believe, one spell I did, it really got the man to just, like, to this day, I have had no contact.
Hmm.
Praise God.
Yeah.
I've forgiven him, but no contact at all. But it was to the point where when my protection order ran out, I feel safe enough now to where I didn't need another one. So
I gotcha.
it it
Yeah.
definitely did something, but I think obviously the power of God intervened, and
Hmm.
so that's where we're at today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I know that you'd also mentioned that you were kind of doing like a business as well, using kind of witchcraft, I assume making like spells or um
Spells, I would get like little tiny broomsticks and decorate them. A big
mhm,
thing of mine was, and I know this sounds so dangerous, I do not condone doing this at all,
mm,
but I had an aunt and an uncle that lived right off of the railroad tracks up where I live,
mhm,
and I would literally walk the railroad tracks collecting railroad spikes, and that was kinda my niche. Like, I would paint them, add dried flowers to them, I would put little cards with them that said,
mm,
"You put this in the 4 corners of your home to ward off evil." That was kinda my thing. I would
yeah,
make, like, ornaments, jewelry, earrings, potion bottles with, like, herbs and dried roses, lavender, whatever for a love spell, prosperity spell.
mm,
Yeah, that was just kinda little doodads and whatnot, and I made
yeah,
money off of it for sure,
yeah,
and then essentially, it all abruptly stopped.
mm,
I stopped selling stuff at the store, all my stuff got taken out, for reasons this day I don't really know. I just know
mm.
it all came to a stop.
I was going to ask, after your spell work turned a little bit more, to the dark side, did you offer those services to others as well? Yeah.
Yeah. I had people that would like reach out through like Facebook and stuff like, hey, can you make me this? Hey, can you make me that? I would ship things to different people.
Hmm.
Not proud of this, but towards the end, I would rip people off. Like I would get the money for the stuff, but then I would be so depressed just laying in bed that I would never make it.
Hmm.
And then that caused a lot of issues with people, rightfully so. And
Yeah.
so I had a pretty long list of, I don't want to say enemies, but people that I really did wrong
Hmm.
throughout that. And I think that it had gotten really powerful and then it just all crumbled. And I think in a sense that was God literally coming down and making everything crumble. Because as I was coming out of the occult, if we can get back and like touch on this later, but as I was coming out of the occult and just kind of slowly just kind of losing interest because I was like, okay, everything just sucks. My life sucks. This sucks.
Hmm.
Everything just sucks. Like the stuff is either not working or it's causing all of this. And I didn't box any of it up, but in my bedroom, I had like a 2-door opening, like a really big closet. And my closet was my altar, which was like a long dresser, chest of drawers, whatever you want to call it. And I
Mm-hmm.
had like I had animal bones, stage, trinkets, tarot cards, books, you name it. I had it on that altar.
Hmm.
And I just slowly lost interest. Like I would stop doing daily readings and I would stop leaving herbs for fairies and I would stop putting out my crystals when the moon phases were changing and collecting moon water and just doing all the things. I just stopped.
Hmm.
And I got so interested and like for my entire life, I'd always, I was friends with a lot of kids growing up. As a teenager, I babysat some. Through my 20s, I babysat. But I decided, I think I want to try to be a teacher. Like, I think I want to go to school for preschool teaching.
Hmm.
I don't know where that came from. It just kind of happened. And so I went to school for preschool teaching, got CPR certified, went through all the things, and I got hired at a couple of places. I turned all of them down for a little tiny daycare and a little church.
Hmm. Hmm.
Tell me God
Yeah.
wasn't working. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And I
Yeah.
worked there for about 7 months. And slowly throughout those 7 months, it just got less and less. And I got happier and happier. And I mean, my mom, my friends will tell you they had never seen me so happy in my life. I was just beaming from ear to ear. I stopped, teaching the little kids about crystals and things and started, bringing things home from teaching, like little flashcards, and we do coloring pages. And
Hmm.
it all just, it fell apart, but it all just kind of stopped too. And praise
Hmm.
God for that.
Yeah. It's almost like as it was falling apart, things were also falling into place. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. That's awesome. I wanted to ask, actually, um, I'm curious about, within witchcraft, one thing that I've kind of heard is that, there's really not, one right way to do it. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
and I know that you had said that you were looking into a lot of aspects of witchcraft, and the rabbit trail was kind of long for you. One, I guess I'm curious about, was there like a specific, like, was it a book that you were following, or were there several books, or like how did you go about knowing, this spell would work this way as opposed to not working this way, or you know what
Right.
I mean?
I had several books. We have a it's a very cool little bookstore here where I live, but they do,
Mm,
they have a New Age witchcraft section. And I
mm-hmm,
got a lot of books from them, some being very old books from like the 70s and 80s, some being newer prints from, 2017 and stuff like that. And I would read them and I would fill up notebooks with notes and stuff. And I just kind of learned, like the placement of the elements for the altars and stuff like this. But my biggest thing was
mm,
actually I watched a lot of like witchy YouTube channels and listened to a lot of podcasts, day in the life videos of witches. And I'm a very visual person. So seeing
mm.
all of that and literally learning it through watching it on my TV, that's how I learned a lot.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are very, very visual learners as well. It's one of the challenges, even with new believers and seasoned believers alike, where it's like at the end of the day, read your Bible. It's like, oh
Yeah.
man, like I have to read. Like,
Yeah.
well, thankfully there's audio Bibles and visuals for like what is it? The Bible Project does a great job with providing
Uh-huh.
visuals behind their teachings and stuff. So I mean I see the value there as well. I think so. But so so ultimately you were just kind of drawing from as many resources as you could and kind of distilling it in your practice,
Yep.
right? Um the next question I have, and maybe it's I don't know, maybe it's just kind of a silly question, but I've not heard about moon water. I'm curious if you could tell me about that. What is that for, or what's
I
the purpose?
would get I had all of these like really cool shaped like bottles and trinkets and stuff, but I had this one specific bottle that I would fill with water. Whenever it was
Hmm.
a full moon, I would set it out on my front porch along with my crystals, and then that was essentially it. And then I just kept the moon water. Sometimes I
So,
would like clean my altar with it and stuff like that. But I think it was
hmm.
just another thing on my checklist. Like, oh, this is something magical. This is witchcraft. This is supposed to help. Um,
S-
Looking back, I think
So,
I was pretty clueless about a lot. Like I tried, but
yeah.
I really didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah, no, well, and I mean, I think that yeah, I would, and I don't know, maybe how you would frame it yourself. Somebody calling you a witch, I would say maybe you would almost be kind of a professional in that way. Like, you're selling the product,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. However, you could frame what a professional witch necessarily looks
Right.
like. But I guess what I mean by that is like part of being a professional is kind of experimentation of the craft. Like ultimately, doctors thought it was great to slap a leech on you 100 years ago,
Right.
and then they realized maybe what if we don't, and what if we
Yeah.
do something
Let's
different,
not.
and you know what I mean? And so they get better and better and better and more efficient, right? So I think even within something like witchcraft, like, well, this did work, but it took a lot of extra, but now I'm maybe streamlining it or whatever. Or but for your the context that you're talking about is kind of like let's just throw it all and see kind of what sticks. So let's get the moon water. Let's do as much as I can to see where I'm finding, I guess, success within it. But is the
Exactly.
idea with the moon like, because I've heard that there are witches that worship the moon goddess or the moon in general.
Mhm.
Is there some sort of like power that you believe it was coming from the moon, or is it like an energy thing, or how would you like
At
what
the
what were
time,
what were you thinking the benefit was there? Yeah.
I thought there was like power coming from the moon, definitely energies. If you had asked me when I was in witchcraft, I was always obsessed with the sun. Like I
Hmm.
literally said at times that I worshiped the sun because I loved sunny days so much. I hated nighttime. I hated gloomy days. Still very mumuch like that. I don't really like the rain and when it snows, but I worship the
Yeah.
creator, not the creation.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about that, the
Mhm.
moon water. That's I mean, my understanding and comprehension of what witchcraft is at a very deep level is just not there. I mean, it's bits and pieces, and
Yeah.
of course, it's a lot of folklore mixed in with what actual witchcraft, looks like. And I guess the reason I was curious about, what if there was something specific that you followed, or how you kind of developed your craft, if you'll forgive the pun.
Yeah.
It, a lot of people who've come out of it said, one of the challenges with witchcraft is because so many people have written material about it, you really don't know what is right or accurate or is actually effective or is not effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to necessarily make it like a mathematical equation, but like when you're doing potions or spells, or when you're creating, tinctures or whatever it is that you're doing, would you say like they all were effective for people, or would you have maybe some customers who are like, hey, I tried this, but the guy didn't fall in love with me, or I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not trying to like,
Yeah. No,
I'm just curious.
I never had anybody say like this didn't work, but I never had
Mm.
anybody say, oh, this did work either.
Interesting.
It was just kind of neutral. But I would have
Yeah.
like repeat customers. So essentially, I guess it worked, but they would always mix it up and get different things. Like they never got the same thing twice.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
honestly, I don't know if it worked or not.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I find most fascinating with it is, if it doesn't work, then don't abandon it, but try something a little bit different, or a little bit more, or a little bit. And I think that's one of the cycles that I find a lot of people kind of get themselves caught up into is well, if this doesn't work the first time, then do more, or do something different. Or again, it's what can we do to get the magic to happen? You know what I mean? What can we do to get the energy to work for us? What can we do to, move it in such a way where I'm reaping the benefit of it, and even so in helping others. I'm not saying that this is your approach to it, but paganism can be very lucrative. And that is one other thing that there have actually been several people who are no longer in paganism, witchcraft, what have you, that have shared like, I had a business and it was a very successful business. And now I don't have that business anymore because I'm following Christ. And so I'm kind of having to reframe and figure this out. But that's one of those things where it's like, oh, I want to become a guru so that I can write a book, so that I can make material, so that I can be profitable effectively,
Exactly.
and so that's one of those elements that I find very, very fascinating, because it just seems so contrary to, we'll say, older Christianity, where I remember there was a school, I think it was in England, where everybody who was going there to become a priest or pastor or whatever it was, they basically said, okay, for the next 2 weeks, you guys cannot ask anybody for food, but you cannot eat any food unless somebody offers it to you, like free will, like no indication that you're hungry or anything. And they would just send them out into the city. And like, from what I understand and the story that I'd heard, all the time they would come back full, or even more than full, or have extra food. And it's like, it's not about, okay, go sell them the gospel so that you can go get a meal. You know what I mean? It's like, no, like God will provide. And that I feel like, again, kind of turns it on its head, where it's like, it doesn't matter how much I can do or produce or whatever, but as long as I'm doing what God is asking me to do, the trust is there that He's going to provide, and He will produce, and He will do whatever it is that I need. And I find that very interesting. Like, God is not necessarily, we'll say, anti like consumer culture, but he's not so concerned about, can you write the book to sell the book to,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? He's like, can you get closer to me? Can you draw closer to me? Because I desire that intimate relationship with you,
Yeah, for sure.
So you are moving on from, well, actually, I don't know if you're moving on, but you're moving into becoming a preschool teacher. You're interested in that. You're working at a church for a couple months. Your mood is starting to change. Are you still practicing witchcraft at this time, or are you starting to kind of abandon it?
Slowly starting to abandon it.
Hmm. Yeah. And
Just losing interest in it in general.
Interesting. Yeah. Is it because just busy with work, so you don't have time to do the witchcraft, or?
I think I started feeling conviction for it without even knowing what conviction was. Like, I was so in love with my class and teaching, and I just devoted all of my time to it that I was like, okay, the witchcraft stuff is really dark, and I don't want that around my kids. Like, I don't want my kids to know this side of me. And so that really started kind of, messing with me a little bit because I was like, okay, I love teaching so much. I also love witchcraft, but I'm falling away from witchcraft and I love the kids more. So it's kind of like I chose the kids over witchcraft.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I know when you were starting out with witchcraft, you were saying it was all kind of light and love, but then it transitioned for you. Do you, and this is just more of, I guess I'm just curious, like, do you feel that after you transition from kind of the light and love element of witchcraft to maybe a little bit more of a darker side of it, are you still able to kind of swing back to that other side, or kind of once you've crossed a threshold, maybe it's, maybe you're not able to really go back? I mean, because now you're talking about witchcraft with the children in context of like, this is a very dark thing.
Yeah.
But originally it was like, oh, I'm the witch in the woods, and like the kids know me, and I'm showing them crystals, and you know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
what was it for you that transitioned where it's like, actually witchcraft is a dark thing? I know you'd said maybe it was kind of like whispers of like conviction and things like that, but was there, I mean, while you're at the church preschool, are you being exposed to Christian staff, or like, is that maybe part of it? Because I was curious about that. I know you said like your mood was changing and was getting better as time went on, which sometimes kids can have that effect on us. Sometimes
Right,
they may have opposite effects too, because children are children. But
Yeah.
That's one of those where it's good. There are some kind of like natural elements to it, but then are there staff, are they like witnessing to you, or are they just like saying like, I don't know, like what did that look like for you?
Yes, they talked about Jesus. I still didn't really know what they were talking about, but like I had heard the name Jesus before. Um, but they would, the kids would have, Bible class, and it was ran in a church. The women that worked with me all went to church, so I would hear, conversations about church things and this and that. I think I was invited to church a couple of times. I denied it because it was my weekend off. I wanted to sleep in. But I was never like rude about it. Like, I never hated Christians or had anything against them. I just always thought that even when I went to church, um, it's always kind of in the back of my mind, thought it was very like hypocritical. I didn't understand. I would very much be like, kind of snarky way of people need to practice what they preach, Um,
Yeah, interesting. So even though you kind of rebuffed some of their like, hey, come to church, you're still somehow you're starting to transition a little bit more.
Yeah.
Things are changing for you.
Mhm.
At what point are you, because this is this still late 20s, or is this early 30s at that point?
This is 29, 28.
29. Okay, so very late 20s, very early 30s, we'll
Yeah.
say. um, so at what point does witchcraft stop for you? I mean, I know you're not really interested in it at this point, but would you still consider yourself like a practicing witch, or have you kind of abandoned it? Like, is your altar still in place?
The altar was still there. It was just
Yeah.
collecting dust. At the time, if somebody had asked me to like make them a potion bottle or something, looking back, I probably would have said no because I just started to feel just like icky about it. Like I just started to over time just not like it. And that's the only way I can really describe that. It just started to get like have like a bad taste in my mouth, honestly.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. So would you attribute that to working in like the church setting, or?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I don't, I always, like in my mind, I have this kind of thought of like, when you see the light, then you also recognize the darkness for what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if you're still kind of in that transition, there's still, I think, in a very, I don't know, we'll say like in our soul or in our spirit, what have you, like there's still this recognition of like, well, wait a second, I don't know if this is good. I don't know if I should be doing this anymore,
Right.
Yeah. So at what point do things start to shift for you? That you start to, maybe we'll say, actually abandon witchcraft or get rid of the altar, or, at what point do things start to change?
Things started to change about 7 months into me being in my first year of preschool teaching. I started to get very, very sick, which led to me ultimately having my gallbladder removed. And after that, I got sicker, and I had to resign from my teaching job, which destroyed me. But during the
Hmm.
process of being so sick for months, not being able to get out of bed, I just gave up on the witchcraft. I didn't mess with it at all. I was too weak to box it up or do anything with it, but it just sat in my closet with my closet door shut, and it literally all just collected dust. And over
Hmm.
the course of from like January, February through August of 2023, I was so sick to the point that I was dying. And
Was
then
this was this like something that did you have and I mean, obviously, however much you want to share about it, but did you have like a specific diagnosis? Like, was there a reason for the sickness all of a sudden?
they couldn't figure out what was going on with me. I went to the doctor so many times, and I would just get like an IV, or you're dehydrated, you're having a panic attack. And then 5 days in a row leading up to my clinical death, I was taken to the hospital, sometimes twice a day by rescue squad. And for whatever reason, they would not admit me. And on the fifth day, I was so sick. Like in my mind, I was like, I am dying. I am not going to make it through the day.
Hmm.
Went to the hospital by squad one time that day. I begged, I pleaded, I'm dying. I'm scared. Please keep me. They didn't keep me. Um, we'll get into the rest of the story. But I didn't find out until about a year and a half after what happened to me, what essentially happened to me. Now, I have a bunch of different doctors. I have a kidney doctor, heart doctor, a regular doctor, you know. Uh, One doctor said that it was an absolute domino effect, that it started with me having COVID, flowed into pneumonia and the flu, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Having all of those sent my body into non-diabetic ketoacidosis, which in
Hmm.
layman's terms, my body went into starvation mode from not being able to eat or anything. And then from being in starvation mode, that caused me to go into a coma. I was found on August 14th of 2023, completely comatose on my bedroom floor, having had missed hitting my head on the corner of a sharp table by like about an inch. That's a miracle in itself that I didn't crack my skull.
Mm-hmm.
But my mom found me, and I was rushed to my hospital. I was told that I was completely, stripped of everything. My body was popped up. I have pictures of me. Like, I did not look like this. It's insane. But later that day, around 5 o'clock, I coded for 16 minutes of cardiac arrest.
16 minutes. And obviously coding means what? No detectable heartbeat or, and during those 16 minutes, they're trying to revive you. They're trying to, like, what are they doing at that
Yeah.
point?
It took them 16 minutes to get a heartbeat back. And during that time, I had a life-changing near-death experience, or I know some people refer to it as an after-death experience. And I remained comatose on life support for 10 days to follow.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So while you're coding, you have this near-death experience or after-death experience. What was that?
It was wonderful. I was not sick. I wasn't in pain. I was in paradise, what I call paradise. And
Yeah.
it was so beautiful. The flowers, the grass, the water. You take the brightest colors that you can imagine here on Earth, and I mean, just maximize them. Add in colors that we don't even know, that we've never seen before, and it's just so beautiful. I saw animals. I saw a tiger, and I could tell you down to just its eyes, its fur. I mean, the details that I remember are incredible. I remember it being kind of like a jungle, but kind of like a valley too. Like there was just plants everywhere and flowers and trees. And I saw like a waterfall. It was beautiful. I saw toucans. Um, I don't know how I transitioned, from place to place. Some things are still pretty foggy, but the next thing I remember is being in like a park-like setting. Like, there's swing sets and there's slides and there's families, and I'm sitting on a bench and I'm just taking it all in. And a guy sits down next to me and he looks at me and he says, "I don't know you." Or, "I know you don't know me, but I know you. I'm sorry. I'm your brother. And I've always known you." And at this point in time, it started to click. Okay, I'm not one, like, I don't know where I'm at right now, but wherever I'm at, this is perfect. I mean, I feel so free. I feel so much love. I feel so much compassion. I never want to leave. Transition again. I'm still in the park, but at this point in time, I'm sitting by a riverbank and the water is just flowing. It's beautiful. And I mean, it's like glistening like diamonds, but it's so blue. And there's butterflies and there's squirrels and there's birds. And I'm just taking it in again, just looking around. And then next thing I know, I look over, and I might get emotional with this because it's so fresh. But I look over, and right there, and keep in mind, I never knew anything about Jesus, but right there is Jesus. I mean, literally right there beside me. And he just looks at me. And I mean, I've said this before, but like, it rewired my soul in some sense, because in that moment when he looked at me and he said, "You are mine. I love you." He just kept saying that. And I felt so much love. Like, love doesn't even sum it up. I don't know what type of word I would use, but just more love than I'd ever felt. I felt like every chain, the witchcraft, and I don't think I even remembered witchcraft but I just remember it felt like everything just broke off. Like,
Hmm.
almost like, say you're in your body, but then someone just cracks it and then you're just free. Like that, it felt so free.
Hmm.
So then he just smiles at me and he says, I have one more thing to show you. So I walk with them and we leave what I call heaven's riverside because I encountered him at the river. And we go and we're walking and coming towards us. It's kind of like faded out at first. I see 4 people. As they get closer, I start to realize who they are. The first was my grandma Mufi. It was my dad's mother who had passed on. The second was my Uncle Richard. And I can tell you down to everything they were wearing. She had on blue jeans and a sweatshirt with a dog on it. He had on blue jeans, blue and white checkered shirt. And he had $1 in his pocket. So when I was a little girl, he would always give me $1 every time he saw me.
Hmm.
Beside him was my grandmother, my grandma Anna, who is the grandma that passed away. And that's when things kind of started to, fall apart.
Hmm.
And beside her was my granddaddy. And they were all just smiling and they looked good. They looked beautiful. They looked healthy. They didn't look sick like they did when they were passing away.
Hmm.
They didn't look as old as they were, but they didn't look young enough to where I could not recognize them. Like I instantly knew who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And my granddaddy said to me, and it wasn't audible, it was like telepathic, I guess would be the word. But he said, granddaughter, it's not your time. You have to go back. And I think I kind of put up a fight because I didn't understand. And I was like, go back to what? Where am I going back to? I don't want to go back. Just like that. And I mean, I tell you, it was faster than lightning. And I don't know how fast lightning is, but just you see lightning go like that. It was fast. And I was back in my body, my eyes open. And the literal first words out of my mouth were, can I have a Dr. Pepper? So I truly believe that God has a sense of humor because that was what I wanted. I mean, I was adamant. I wanted Dr. Pepper. They did not let me have one. But then after that, reality set in. We can get to that in a minute.
Yeah. So while you're having this experience, I know you talked about what you saw. And so maybe this is going to be a strange question, but were there any like smells associated with anything? Was there anything that hit your senses in a different way? Not really. And I don't think it necessarily matters one way or the other, but it's just, I am that kind of person where I'm just very curious about like the way that we experience God or heavenly things. It seems to be so unique to the individual sometimes,
Right.
and some people will say like, well, there was this smell or there was this, something that matters to them, something that has an impact for them, like you being able to see your grandparents. I'm curious, in the park when you saw your brother, did you have a brother, or what, do you
Yes.
know anything about that?
My mom had miscarried before I was born.
So that's effectively,
Yes.
that's who had approached you there.
Yes.
Interesting. What are you feeling when you're there, like inside? I know you kind of said there's like a freedom, there's like a, a lightness there. Is there, even now, I guess when you're reflecting on it, is there anything inside that changes? I know you said, you'll get emotional, which is totally fine, right? That's amazing. hopefully we all would want to get emotional when we think about, the love and intention that God has for each and every single one of us. But is there, reflecting on your experience, does it, and I mean, I don't mean this in like a selfish way. So
Yeah.
it's like, so the phrasing of the question may be a little bit strange, but like, does it like do anything for you? I mean, like when you talk about it, all of a sudden it's like the rest of your day just seems to kind of like glide on, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, when cause I've had these like very powerful moments, not like your moment. I've never had any sort of near death experience or anything like that, but there's moments where I feel the presence of God, and then all of a sudden the rest of the night just kind of washes away because it's not, you know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that your sort of feeling as well?
Yeah. If somebody, asks me about it and I talk about it, my entire demeanor changes. Like, I'm just like, yes, let's talk about Jesus. Like, let's talk about this. If you have questions, feel free to ask me. I might not really be able to answer it, but just any time that I get the chance to tell it,
Hmm.
I always pray about it first. Like, Lord, if this is the opportunity, make it happen. It's not the opportunity, block it in general. But so
Yeah.
far, nothing has been blocked. And I've just been, sharing it here, there, kind of everywhere. And, it can be, I'm not going to lie to anybody. It can be a little bit nerve wracking, being on the internet and being on, podcasts and clips and all this. But God gave me a testimony to share. And so that's what I got to do.
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking about testimonies in general. I mean, obviously this is a testimony podcast. But I think one of and maybe it's just inherent in sharing a testimony, the whole purpose is, who does my past belong to? Right? Is my story, or is it for God's glory? Is it his story?
Right.
And and who am I living for now? And who am I living for in the future? Right? Like all of that becomes God's testimony, or a testimony to God and who he is, as we frame it, in a way that gives him glory. Right? And so I think, I guess what I was just going to say was like the idea of giving a testimony, sharing a testimony. I wonder if that's just one of the good graces that God has about it, is that as we talk about him and we remember his goodness, then his goodness is kind of carried within us, like in a way that just feels better, feels good. Like again, this idea of like getting emotional, like as an American, sometimes we can feel like, oh, we're emotional and this is like a bad thing because we have to
Right.
be a certain way or look a certain way, or and all throughout the entire Bible, when people are having very real interactions with God, they do not reserve themselves. They're not able to contain themselves in a way that we would say is like kind of proper. David dancing, completely nude, or the paralytic who Jesus is like, don't tell anybody. He's like, no problem, and proceeds to go tell everybody. And like,
Right.
all these things where it's like when we see what God does for us and in us and even through us, it's hard for us to not be thankful and to not carry kind of that light feeling like you're talking about. I mean, oftentimes when I feel the Holy Spirit working within me, it's like this bubbling, this very open feeling of like, I don't get that with anything else.
Right.
And I think that sharing our testimonies um opens the door to that. And we see that throughout the Old Testament too, where even with Moses, it's like every day remind the Israelites, say the Shema, like who it is that we worshiped, where God has brought us from, these sorts of things. And I think that there's really good intent behind that, where God is like, I know that if you remember what I've brought you through, where I will bring you to, and I'll continue to bring you out of these things. And so I think that's the beauty. And I know you've shared your testimony with a few different shows, and even the people who you share your testimony with, I think the nice thing is we share our testimony in hopes that God will bless that person, that the enemy will be defeated that is living within them.
Yes.
But at the same time, we recognize that it blesses us immensely because we get to remember how good God is, as though we would forget. I mean,
Yeah.
we can be pretty forgetful sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's like, man, God has brought you from a place where, and the beauty of it that I see in the story, that in the testimony that you're sharing, right, is like, you've always loved kids. You've always had a childlike nature and appreciation yourself, right? And so you carried it to a degree that you thought made sense. And then God says, well, what if you were actually a preschool teacher? And what if you actually accepted a job at this small little Christian preschool, right?
Right.
And now, and then all of a sudden, your health is impacted in a way where you're not understanding what's going on. There's really no, reason at the time. The doctors are baffled, they're confounded. And even talks about like how you're feeling more depressed, where you're like, I don't want to deal with the witchcraft stuff. I stuck a lot of people who placed orders because I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't have and God takes all of that and is like, hold on, I can use this for my glory, right?
Yeah,
And it's like, where do you find your energy? Where do you find the will to do things? Again, with children that you're working with, that you're educating. And so it's like God is taking all of these things and turning them, right, for his own glory.
Yeah.
And then ultimately to just push you over the edge. You don't want to go to church? Fine. I'm going to take this illness, this mystery illness. And when your heart stops, my heart for you starts in a very real way, where I'm like, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is what I have to offer. Like I follow me, right? Follow me.
Exactly.
And
yes.
and then 16 minutes go by. And then I know you said you were still in a coma for was it 10 days altogether? And then just God being amazing as he always is. And like you said, him having his sense of humor, you're like, I would like a Dr. Pepper. And it's like, wait a second, you're alive and you're not in a coma anymore. And it's like, you're like, and I'd really like a Dr. Pepper. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And, but so that was amazing, but I did come back to a broken body, and, it was hard. And, I had a traumatic brain injury. I was in complete renal failure. I was on dialysis 3 times a week for 4 hours at a time, sometimes longer. I had a dialysis at chest port. I had so many surgeries that I can't even keep up with. I was disabled in a wheelchair for months. A lot of my hair fell out due to dialysis. And I basically felt like a human vegetable for a while. I had to go through the rehab process of, occupational therapy and physical therapy. And they had to show me, flashcards of like, this is a cat, this is a dog, colors, numbers, adding, subtracting, writing paragraphs, reading sentences. Had to learn how to work a microwave again. Just basic normal things that I had completely forgotten how to do. I still knew how to read and I could add, but at like a kindergarten level. It took a little bit, still to this day, my handwriting isn't the best. Like sometimes it'll be really pretty, but other times it'll be shaky. God has fully healed. So my heart is completely healed. My kidneys have fully recovered and they have remained fully recovered. My 3rd year of recovery now. They have said that I have overcome a traumatic brain injury. My hair has grown back, and from being disabled in a wheelchair, being told that I may never walk, swim, run, teach, I can do all of the above. All glory to God. If it hadn't been for God, then I wouldn't be sitting here with you. I very much believe that I should be dead. I should be in hell for the things that I did. And
Hmm.
I had an absolutely life-changing near-death experience that completely drew me away from witchcraft once and for all. And Jesus, he saved my life. And,
Hmm.
yeah, for the kidneys, for the heart, the brain, everything. I mean, it's all Jesus. It's not me. It's not the doctors. He, guided the doctors and guided their hands and their actions and their hearts and gave them wisdom. But it, my life is a God thing. It's a total God thing.
Hmm. It's always beautiful to hear somebody share their testimony in this way, where your heart, your kidneys, all of it were effectively at war with your own body, and then now
Yeah.
they're healed. And it's one thing to have that happen to you and to recognize God healed it. God is making it all function the way that it is supposed to function. And prayerfully, I hope that we all recognize that as our bodies function the way that they're, quote unquote, supposed to, that's still a God thing in all of us as well. I mean, my kidneys don't have to do a doggone thing outside of God encouraging and imploring them to please continue on in the way that they should go. And I think that that's one of the things that I appreciate about your testimony is, like, all of our faculties should work to give glory to God. And you are saying, at one point, my heart didn't want to do what it was supposed to do, but now it is. And now my heart is living for the glory of God. And now my kidneys are living for the glory of God because I am living for the glory of God. My hair grows to the glory of God, right? Like, my teaching ability is for the glory of God. Like, what an amazing thing and powerful that God had to kind of strip that down for you,
Yeah.
so that you can walk in that way. And I pray that your testimony would impact those who recognize the things that we do. It doesn't matter what it is, we can do to God's glory because he has allowed that. He has allowed that, I mean, I in all things, right? In all things we give praise, we give thanks to God, and prayerfully in all the things that we do, we give glory to him. And even the idea that the doctor said, I don't know if you'll be able to walk again, I don't know if you'll be able to do XYZ, whatever it is, every single thing now that you can do that they were not positive that you would be able to do is a reflection of God's glory in you, right? And so prayerfully, again, that shows doctors. I don't know, honestly. I have a hard time understanding how any doctor is not a Christian because
Yeah.
of how many miracles they witness, daily, weekly, whatever it is, where it's just like, oh man, this shouldn't have worked, but it works. Your heart should not be working, but it's working.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know.
You shouldn't be
wait a
here
second,
asking for a Dr. Pepper, but yet you're here
Right.
asking for a Dr. Pepper.
Right.
Like,
Which they didn't give you, but still.
exactly. I also asked for a Gatorade. They wouldn't give me that either.
Interesting. They didn't want you to have any electrolytes that way. They were going to just give you the
months. Not for months. I was on 19 medications a day for months.
Wow.
Like the pill counters, the weekly pill counters that you can get filled up to the brim, but every single day I had to take an entire one. Like it was crazy, the things that my body went through. And then like walking up and down stairs, that was really hard for a really long time. I couldn't do it. My bed was in the living room of my 2-story townhouse. Went from the bed to the bathroom. It would take me 5 minutes to take a few steps in the walker. And then, I just prayed through it, and, I cried through it. And there were times I actually yelled at God and was like, God, please heal, my disability now because I
Mm.
can't walk. I can't do anything that I want to do. And I prayed this prayer, cried these tears, and I screamed these screams for a month. And when I tell you now, the kidneys and the heart and stuff, that it took a little bit of time. The kidneys had to build up, they had to recover.
Mm.
But when I tell you the disability part, I woke up one day and the pain was gone. I could wiggle my toes, I could move my feet, and I stood up without that walker and I walked across my bedroom floor. And then I walked down the steps of my apartment. And to this day, I'm still walking. And I can wear boots, I can wear heels, I can do, all the girly things. But they they looked at me, and I mean, on eye level, and these doctors weren't, the kindest doctors that I'd ever met. And they were pretty stern and strict. And they were like, look, like, this is your reality. 9 times out of 10, you are not going to walk again. You are going to be in this
Mm.
chair. And I looked at them at the time and I said a choice word. I said a few of them, but essentially I said, yes, I will. I will walk again. I don't accept that. And
Mm.
yeah, so here I am, fully healed.
Yeah.
I still have my moments, I still have my days. There's still things that are difficult for me. With overcoming the traumatic brain injury, grocery shopping, that can get really overwhelming sometimes. Math still can get overwhelming at times. When it gets
Mm.
really cold, I get body aches. I was diagnosed with 2 different forms of neuropathy when I woke up from being in the hospital. But guys, compared to what it was to me now, I say I'm 100% healed because
Mm.
there's no possible way. I mean, I went from that to this. Again, it's only a God thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, and maybe this is a silly question, I guess, but after you had the near death experience where you see family, you see Jesus, you see all these things, what was the moment where you knew maybe I need to not only give up the witchcraft, but I need to start following Jesus?
The moment I encountered Jesus, I knew that
Just
everything I
s-
did was just wrong.
something about seeing him or hearing him
So
or
just being in
yeah.
his presence, I just knew, and I knew that instantly. Keep in mind, I didn't know anything about Jesus. I didn't know
Mm.
about the gospel. I didn't know anything, but I knew when he was right beside me that that was Jesus Christ, my Lord and my Savior. I mean, it was I knew. And then I knew
Mm.
that everything I had done was, I don't want to say I necessarily knew that it was bad, but I knew that it was the opposite of Jesus. And I
Mm.
knew that the two couldn't mix.
Yeah. That's like I said, I knew it maybe sounded like a bit of an odd question, but
Yeah,
that
not
I
at
think
all.
that was maybe something that I missed with the experience, because that's a feeling I think that's hard to capture in a way, you know. Uh, for me, I have that sort of feeling where I know that I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, but God is being very gentle
Yeah.
in letting me know, which is frequently.
Yeah.
I'm working on it, but it's one of those things where it's like, is Dad disappointed in you? Maybe, but is Dad being disappointed towards you? No, not at all. Like he's trying to guide, and like that's that feeling that I get where it's like, the witchcraft and all the things. It's like, does it matter? It doesn't. It doesn't matter anymore when I see Jesus, and I
Exactly.
think that's where I find myself with things like repentance. Like the things that I'm doing wrong, do those things matter? It doesn't if I stop doing them because I'm just looking God in the face. Like that's, if I'm looking Jesus in the face, like whatever it was that I was doing, I know that it is in the past and that God is drawing me closer to himself, and that's what matters, and that's the, you know, that's where it is. So I really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your testimony. If someone who is a practicing witch, if someone who is very curious about luring fairies onto their property, if someone is telling children about crystals and you know, nature and all these things with a magical bent, if somebody like that starts to go from being kind of love and light and recognizing there's a dark element and things are not working, or their mental health is being affected, or anything like your own history, like your own past, if somebody like that comes to church, what would you want the church to say to that person, or how would you want the church to interact with that person?
I would tell the church to be very loving towards that person and to not be judgmental and to meet them with kindness, because I believe that's what Jesus would do. Jesus met me where I was at. And, you know, a witch, a warlock, an atheist, I feel like if you walk through the church doors of any church, of any denomination, I feel like if you are not met with love and kindness, then try another one. Because you should be met with love and kindness, no matter what your beliefs are. That's what we're supposed to do. At least that's what I've come to know. You know, I would never look at someone that's a witch and be like, oh, you're condemned and you're going to hell. I would want to be like, hey, you know, do you want to have a conversation about heaven? I'd love to see you there one day. Like you have to have it with kind intentions. Because if you're just like, oh, witchcraft is wrong, you're going to hell. Well, if someone had said that to me when I was in it, I would have laughed in your face. I wouldn't have listened to a word you had to say. So I would tell the church, you know, be mindful, be kind. You know, still use your discernment, but overall, just be kind and listen. You know, like you said earlier, church is supposed to be like a hospital. You're supposed to be able to go there if you're broken, if you're in need. I just, if churches are watching this testimony, then that's what I pray. You know, I was met with more kindness and love from my church when I rolled through in a wheelchair. And half of them still, you know, didn't know anything about me. Some thought I was a witch. Some were like, she was kind of all over the place. You know, my pastor kind of knew I was kind of all over the place. You know, I knew witchcraft was bad at this point. I was all in for Jesus, but I didn't know, you know, what a baptism was. I didn't know any of these things. I was adamant on being baptized, but I was met with love and kindness and compassion. Oh, honey, we've been praying for you, you know, having the doors open for me as I rolled in through the wheelchair. Like, that's the kind of kindness that you need to search for. That's what I would say.
Yeah, it makes me think of the blind man with Jesus, where it's like, well, who healed you? I don't know. All I know is I was blind, but now I see.
Exactly.
And I think that's that love and compassion and kindness that you're talking about, is this idea of like, if you're coming in spiritually sick, then we are the place to help you become spiritually well. And I think that is, like you're saying, like that is what church should look like, you know, for those who are coming seeking that type of healing. Savannah, I really do appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sharing your testimony with me. If anybody is experiencing anything like you've been experiencing, or maybe has more questions for you, is there anywhere that they can find you online?
Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook. It's just Savannah, and I'll spell my last name. It's Muse. And then on Instagram, it's all lowercase and just all one big word, but it's Pits to Paradise. And you can find me there. I'm my mom's caregiver, so I'm not like just constantly on my phone, but I will see your message and I will reply to you. I try to anyway. So yeah, and I'm always kind. I'm a super friendly person. I'm really down to earth, and I love to talk about Jesus. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much. God bless you.